Welcome back, everyone. This is Frank DiMora from the End Times Research Ministry. You're going to see the next video. This is part 2 of a 3-part series that I'm doing. The title of this series is Drought, Famines, the Bee Deaths, and the Rising Food Prices, Part 2. Now, in my last video, I ended with the documents about the food going up between June 2006 to June 2007. Now we're going to move on to another date.
A dramatic and relentless increase in the price of staples like rice, wheat, and cassava is undermining the poor's attempts to climb out of poverty.
This is a shock, and we're quite concerned that it may well reverse some of the gains that we've witnessed in terms of poverty reduction in recent years.
Sub-Saharan Africa may see its progress in reducing poverty halted or even reversed.
The poverty rates will increase, and we're in some regions, for example in Africa, we have in the last 5 or 6 years seen some progress in a number of countries. But these are the very same countries that now may well be the most affected by increases in food prices as well as energy.
Overall, global food prices are up by 83%, with prices expected to remain high in the medium term. The concern is more expensive food could lead to a rise in malnutrition, irreversibly stunting the growth of many children under 5. The report says many governments are trying to counteract high food prices by expanding safety nets, offering food for work, or distributing emergency aid. And it warns that export bans hurt importers and reduce incentives for production. The bank has called for more funding for emergency food aid and is doubling its lending to boost agriculture in Africa as part of policy response.
Now, this article that came out June 15th of 2010, food prices to rise by up to 40% over next decade, the UN report warns. The growing demand for emerging markets and for biofuel production will send prices soaring, according to the OECD and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. And on the right-hand side, you see a little write-up about Somalia and the protests going on there because of the high food prices. And we do know that the Lord did tell us the nation would come against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So in this case, you have the Somalis fighting against the Somali government, fighting amongst themselves because of the food prices that have gone through the roof, just like I've been warning over the years, pointing to what Jesus Christ said. Let's move on.
So let's talk about the economy for a moment. In fact, the CEO of the world's largest retailer has a very important warning for all of us, for U.S. consumers. He says that serious inflation is indeed on the horizon, and it's going to have a very big impact on basic necessities like food and clothing. Eric Bolling, the host of Follow the Money on the Fox Business Network, joins me now to talk about this. When the CEO of Walmart is flagging, folks, we're in for some serious inflation, he's also prepared. All his costs are rising, right? So that's going to be passed on to the consumer.
Sure, and his input costs are rising, the price of corn, the price of cotton, all the input to make and retail this stuff, transport it, forget gasoline and diesel fuel to get this stuff over here. But he also says labor costs are starting to rise out of China. So he went down the list of different input costs, labor, food, et cetera, energy. The bottom line is Americans have to expect higher prices.
So, where does this, let's take a look. We built something that shows a comparison of just bread, for example, just to give everybody an indication of how, and you can feel it, when I go to the grocery store and it feels like it's just getting a little bit bigger, the bill every day when you're buying the same stuff you've always bought. So there's the price for white bread, $1.39 in February of 2011, and it's up 2.2%. That's a year-over-year change in bread. So that just
not bad in bread. Take a look at corn. Corn's up 92%. Why does corn matter? Corn is in just about everything you buy. They use it for, first of all, ethanol, but in the things you eat. High fructose corn syrup is in almost every snack, almost every soda, every single cereal you buy just has either corn or some corn-based sweetener in it. So the price of corn going up, but input costs are going up across the board. The government won't tell you this, Martha. That core inflation number that they're reporting.
Ex-food and energy.
Ex-food and energy. Why in the world would they leave food and energy out, the two things that we use?
Because they're volatile, Eric, and so they can't be in the indicator because they're too volatile.
That's theirs.
Now we're moving on to June 17th of 2010. See on the left-hand side from the Business Insider, the chart of the day, food prices are about to explode. Now that was in 2010. Now on the right-hand side, you see August of 2012. And the food prices did explode. And as you're going to see, they keep doing so. Watch the video.
Conference on International Food Aid is set to begin Monday in Kansas City. This is a top UN official is predicting a new era of hunger. Recently, over 30 countries have been hit with riots or violent protests, all because of the rising cost of food. Michelle Miller has more.
In Haiti this week, riot police turned their guns on the nation's hungry. Looting and violence that claimed the life of a UN peacekeeper capped 3 days of unrest by those who can no longer afford to eat. A food crisis with deadly consequences is spreading across the globe. The hardest hit so far are those living in the third world, on the razor's edge of poverty, places like Egypt, Bangladesh, and Zimbabwe.
While many are worrying about filling their gas tanks, many others around the world are struggling to fill their stomachs.
What we are seeing is a perfect storm.
The World Food Program blames soaring food prices on a convergence of rising energy costs, natural disasters linked to climate change, and competition for grain used to make biofuels like ethanol. Worldwide, food prices have risen 40% since mid-2007, and close to 40 countries are facing food emergencies. With 1 billion people living on less than $1 a day, the absolute minimum for survival, the crisis is beginning to threaten political stability.
A hungry man is an angry man, and I think that's what all the governments are grappling with.
The UN reports unrest in 33 countries, 20 of which have imposed some sort of food price controls. After Haiti's president cut the price of rice by 15% today, its Senate dismissed the country's prime minister.
In many developing countries, the poor spend up to 75% of their income on food. When prices of basic foods rise, it gets hard.
In some first world countries, too. At this food bank in New York City, caseworkers say shrinking supplies can't keep pace with a client base that's doubled in 2 years. The World Food Program says it's facing a $500 million shortfall in funding this year, and the problem is still growing. Michelle Miller, CBS News, New York.
Here's to hoping you make more money. DealNews.com came out with its list of things that'll cost you more.
$54.59.
We picked 5 and we'll start at the grocery store. Dick Reinhardt has been in the biz for 50 years and hasn't seen so many factors come together to drive prices up.
This was a perfect storm. Basically, the last 3 years.
This year, meat, poultry, and dairy all going up.
We had a drought. Corn crop was down. Wheat crop was down. Bread is made out of wheat. We feed our animals corn.
USDA expects meat, poultry, and dairy prices to go up around 4%. Number 2, as Dick just mentioned, no rain, less grain, means at the very least, cereal and bakery is going up. USDA says up close to 3%.
My first law of economics. Everything affects everything.
Dr. Logan Kelly runs the Center for Economic Research. He says global factors are contributing.
So you're having a greater demand, more people wanting the same basic amount of resources that the world can provide. And so that's pushing commodity prices up long run.
So here's a case of instability because of the food crisis. And the weather is not helping at all in this situation. And again, these are the same things that Jesus warned us about.
A conference on international food aid is set to begin Monday in Kansas City. This is a top UN official is predicting.
Drought had a huge impact on U.S. crops, especially corn and soybeans, and more dry weather is forecast for this year. Since these crops are also largely used to feed livestock, and the prices of milk, beef, and chicken, are they about ready to go sky high as well? Joining me now, food industry analyst with supermarketguru.com, Phil Leppert. Phil, I saw an inflation report earlier this week that said that inflation, the consumer price index, was at 0. And then food prices, when you include those, it was up just a little bit. Do you agree?
No, absolutely not, Tom. If you take a look, and you pointed out,
was kind of on the cusp of whether they were going to pass it or not. We were talking about $8 milk prices, and shortly after I last saw you, they just kicked the can down the road another month or two. So now what's going to happen? Are we going to still see those $8 milk prices?
I don't think we're going to see $8 milk prices. However, keep in mind that this farm bill extension is only 9 months. Typically, farm bills are passed for 5 years. So just as we saw all the anxiety about the fiscal cliff, come 8.5 months from now, we're going to be talking again about the possibilities of $8 milk. Keep in mind that the government now subsidizes milk, all dairy products, about $18 a hundredweight. If in fact that goes away and the farm bill expires, that's going to about double. That's why people are talking about $8 milk.
And that was some news for 2013, and it still looks dire. And as you go into 2014, you'll see some other news showing that the direction that we're seeing by the current events is the direction that Jesus talked about. There's an article, The Global Need for Grain That Farms Can't Fill. You see a scarcity of wheat, drought, and competition from other crops have suppressed wheat production in recent years, even as global demand has risen. Adjusted for inflation, wheat prices are hitting their highest level in a quarter century. And of course, if you read the Revelation, Jesus focuses in on wheat and barley, and I believe it's for a good reason. Now, here's another article that came out in 2010. The Russian wheat may climb to $300 a ton on drought. Grain tender values say. So, again, the issue of the drought affecting the wheat staple, which most of the people around the world eat. Thousands protest against high food prices. This was in February of 2011. And we see that there's still problems in the Middle East. Thousands of people have gathered in the India capital Delhi to take part in a rally to protest against rising food prices and unemployment that go hand in hand. And here you have Egypt's wheat stocks decline amid political crisis. And this was March 13th of 2013. Nation after nation feeling the tensions because of lack of food or people not being able to buy that food. But take a look at this. This came out in May, and it said food supply under assault as climate heats up. Warmer and moisture air ringing much of this planet, punctuated by droughts in other locales, is threatening the prime ingredients in many daily meals, including the maple syrup on your morning pancakes and the salmon on your evening grill, as well as the wine in your glass and the chocolate on your dessert tray, according to 4 recent studies. So little by little, reports from all over the place showing us that the prices are going up. Now mix in the atmosphere misfortunes spanning 2 mainstays of American farms, corn and cows. Heavier than normal spring rains have put the corn crop far beyond schedule. Only 28% of the cornfields have been planted this year compared to 85% at this time in 2012, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So a decline. And that decline, you can feel it in your wallet. Now here is a list, grocery list. Take a look at the price of the increase from 2012. You'll see 2012 to 13, the quarters that are meant there. And you can see the increase in prices for all the different staples. For example, lettuce. One size of lettuce. Here's the brand, it doesn't matter. In the first quarter of 2012, it's $1.17. By 2013, it is now $1.48. And that quarterly change was 25.42%. And you can freeze this frame in the video and check out the rest of the items in this article But if you're going shopping, the mothers and the fathers who are doing the shopping, they know how these prices are going through the roof. Consumers feeling the effects of rising food prices. March 27, 2013. Again, talking about how fast and how much the prices are going up. Now take a look at this. This is pretty interesting. I'm going to show you a couple examples. And these examples are coming because affected by the drought. Whole chicken. Look down here, you'll see $4.52. But in 2013, it is now $4.91 from that 2011 price. Then you look down for the eggs, $1.77. In 2011, you'll see it is now $1.88, 2013. And then here we have $1.81 for bread, 2011. Now $1.96. It's a big jump. And last, in this example, the milk, $1.79 in 2011, $1.92 in 2013, and that price is going up. Now we're moving to September 27, 2013, and this is a really good example of many of the signs that Christ warned about. The droughts, the bad weather, the changing weather, prices of food. Watch this.
In the news tonight, top scientists at the United Nations say they want you to look at the pictures they have been studying of planet Earth. The air, the water, the soil. Hundreds of scientists saying tonight it is visual proof of global warming and what we all have to do next. ABC's Dan Harris with today's big announcement.
Devastating floods in Colorado. Heat records in Las Vegas. Superstorm Sandy. Melting glaciers, dying coral reefs, declining penguin populations. Today's UN report says we will be seeing much more of these kinds of things in the coming decades as a result of climate change, which, for the first time, they pin with near certainty on us humans.
It is extremely likely that changes in our climate system for the past half a century are due to human influence.
Rising heat already costs the average American family, like the Rieblings of New Jersey, and everything from food to air conditioning. But that's nothing, says today's report. If the world doesn't make big changes soon, by the year 2040, we could very well have released enough greenhouse gases that we will have locked in a global temperature rise of 3.6 degrees, which is where potentially irreversible and catastrophic changes kick in. We're talking about an increase in animal extinctions, a drying up of farmland that could lead to massive food shortages, and putting us on a path towards sea level rise that could swallow up parts of major American cities like New York, Miami, and San Diego. Skeptics have predictably accused the UN panel of being alarmist, but Princeton climate scientist Michael Oppenheimer, who is on the panel, says this is a major wake-up call. Why do you think there isn't a greater sense of urgency out here in the real world about climate change?
A concern that's mostly in the future is something you can easily put off and not worry about today. But this is bearing down on us. It's coming at us like a Mack truck.
All right, so what kind of changes need to be made and how will they affect you? Experts say we need to shift to cleaner energy like natural gas, wind, and solar, and move toward more energy-efficient cars and home appliances. Some of this could be more expensive for us, frankly, but it is definitely cheaper than runaway global warming.
And they were unequivocal today.
Unequivocal.
Now, if you don't believe me or trust these videos, go into the Bible and read Matthew chapter 24. Read Luke chapter 21 or Mark, his gospel, where he gives the signs, chapter 13. And you will see that everything they talked about here, the water rising, and of course the Lord in Luke 21, 11 talks about, Luke 21:25, he talks about the seas and the waves roaring. And he talks about the droughts in the Revelation. He talks about it in the Gospel. All of these things are coming to a head right now. And in this news report of September 27 by Diane Sawyer, they asked a question, how bad is it going to get? It's going to get a lot worse. I need to tell you that. I know that it's not good news for those many, many people who don't believe in the Lord, but for us who believe in the Lord, we know that these are signs that our Messiah will be coming for us shortly. That is good news. On February 28th of 2014, drought threatens Southeast Asia food price grains amid haze. Singapore, they're having problems. Drought parching Singapore and swaths of Malaysia and Indonesia threatens to rise food prices. It's over and over again. And you put Revelation 6, chapter 6, verse 5 and 6 together, where people will be working all day long. You see the footprints of that through the news. The Telegraph, March 31st of 2014. Britain faces food price rises, floods, and deadly heat waves as a result of climate change. Britain faces food price rises and water shortages as well as floods and deadly heat waves as a result of the climate change, a major report by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, finds on Monday. Other parts of the world will even, look at this, even harder hit as less able to adapt to the impacts, the IPCC warned. Food shortages and poverty, of which Jesus talked about, look at this, will be exacerbated and could lead to the outbreak of wars, the report said. And the Lord said that that's exactly what's going to happen. Why do you think people go to war? Well, if they're thirsty and they want somebody's water that has it, they go to war. If they don't have any food and they know where the food is, they're going to go and try to get that food. And that's what we've seen with the Arab uprising. The news you're going to see now came out Thursday, July 31st of 2014. An update.
New at 5, a discouraging new report about California's drought. More on that and on a new public awareness campaign to encourage people to conserve water. Here's more from Eyewitness News reporter Carlos Grande.
More than half of California is now under what is called an exceptional drought stage. According to this new report by the U.S. Drought Monitor, that's the highest level. It hasn't been this severe in 40 years.
We are in an unprecedented drought, and there is seemingly no end in sight.
Officials are launching a new statewide campaign to increase drought awareness.
We are having record historic lows in water. In fact, the state of California, in its recorded history, has never seen a drier year than it did last year, and this year is not looking very good.
Billboards like this will be going up across Southern California. There's a character called Lawn Dude saying he only needs to drink water 2 days a week. The images are meant to be humorous, but the message is very serious.
The water is always there, and they hear it on the news, they get we're in a drought, and everybody goes, but I'm doing my part. And people are, by and large, but our water usage isn't really dropping in Southern California, so we're asking people, take an extra step, do something extra.
And there's an app that people can use if they see water waste. It's called VisSafe, and it allows someone to take a picture or a video. It records the location, and then you can send the photo to water officials so they can investigate. Meanwhile, you can remain anonymous.
The water crisis here in Southern California is extreme, and people are passionate about the crisis they're in, and they're playing by the rules, and they want to hold others accountable to also play by those rules.
Officials say in this time of crisis, every little bit helps. At the Water District headquarters, they shut down their fountain to save water. It might be some time before it gets turned on again. In downtown Los Angeles, I'm Carlos Grande, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Coffee prices are on the rise quickly because of unprecedented drought in Brazil, world's largest coffee producer. Starbucks is set to raise prices starting tomorrow morning on some of its products from 10 to 15 cents. It follows moves by Dunkin' Donuts and Folgers, which have already raised prices on some of their prepackaged coffee by about 9%.
California's drought has led to an historic water crisis. It's gotten so bad that this week the state's governor signed sweeping new legislation on groundwater pumping, making it the last state in the West to regulate the practice. And with some local wells running dry, those who can't afford it are drilling deeper. And that's leaving some poor communities in the dust. Here's NBC's Al Roker.
Monson is a speck of a town in California's San Joaquin Valley.
So this is our daily life, the water.
And it's here that Gladys Kalunga's well ran dry.
So 3 months, you are living without what most people consider a
an everyday occurrence.
A precious liquid, yes. We can't shower. We have to carry in buckets to shower.
Gladys and her husband own their home. And while the county's delivering drinking water, they are responsible for their own well.
So where are you getting the water from?
Well, when my husband gets off of work, he has to go hunting for water for us.
The Kalungas are not alone.
Take the pallets of water.
In nearby East Porterville, roughly 1,200 people are without water.
You see that over there?
In late August, the county had rallied a team to assess and deliver.
A lot of people out here are in despair.
Tulare County is the fruit, nut, and dairy basket of the nation. And for the first time in a century, there was no surface water. That's to say water from mountains, rivers, or lakes to deliver to farmers.
We are totally reliant right now on whatever flows underneath our feet.
And in order to get that water, most everyone is having to drill deeper. By July of this year, the county had already issued more well drilling permits than they did in all of 2013.
So agriculture loses that scarce, precious resource to grow agricultural crops. It's not just an impact to the farmer, it's an impact to this entire part of California.
But water advocates say the lack of groundwater regulation has left poor communities vulnerable.
It's literally a race to the bottom. So it's whoever can afford to drill, put in a deeper straw, wins.
Laurel Firestone is co-founder of the not-for-profit Community Water Center. A lot of money's made on agriculture here.
Well, I think we are all part of the agricultural system. I think that we need to start thinking that way more holistically because we're all interconnected.
And residents like Gladys are hoping the future holds a solution.
You see it happening somewhere else, but not here in California. I mean, we're living it. We're not just seeing the drought. We're feeling the drought.
Al Roker, NBC News, New York.
I think you're getting a good picture now why the Lord talked about people not being thirsty, people not being influenced by the scorching heat. It's real life situations for many people, and it's now affecting the United States as well, where many people thought that they would be untouchable.
A healthy and full lake in Northern California. There's only one problem. This picture is 3 years old. And now I'm walking on top of that very same bridge. Take a look. It is a virtual desert. This is what drought looks like in the state of California. Here's another before and after side by side. And just when this drought couldn't seem any worse, new research indicates that the depletion of groundwater in the state may actually trigger earthquakes. More on that in a moment. First, this is Lake Oroville. A boater's paradise, at least when it's full. More importantly, it's a reservoir storing water, ultimately piped into homes, and for agriculture, hoping to grow much of the nation's fruits and vegetables.
We have 167 miles of shoreline.
John Frito took us on a boat to see that shoreline, and it's even more astounding up close. The lake seems more like a narrow river. The drought has created a canyon, a hillside of rock that's normally covered by water. The water level is down by more than 200 feet. It's a common sight throughout the state. Most of California's major reservoirs are less than half full.
What would we be seeing? We would be seeing the water up probably halfway up that hillside at this time of the year.
More than 80% of the state is either in the extreme or exceptional category, the highest levels. It's meant things like no showers or running water for several communities, an increase in wildfires, brown and neglected public parks, and farmers losing their crops.
It's like money. It's there. Our product's there.
Jesse Rodriguez grows table grapes and estimates he'll lose 40% of his crop this year due to the drought.
So water's the main thing. Without water, we cannot survive.
With low reservoirs, farmers are having to pump water out of the ground. And as if all that weren't bad enough, there is new information from researchers who believe the depletion of groundwater in California's Central Valley could destabilize the infamous San Andreas Fault and trigger earthquakes. The study, published in the journal Nature, concluded that removing so much weight in the form of groundwater causes the earth to spring upward, and the change in pressure can cause those quakes.
Earthquakes are these mysterious things that happen under our feet. So, having a way for people to cause these earthquakes to happen is unsettling.
Experts say the quakes would be small and unlikely to cause any damage. Still, it's yet another example of why this drought is causing so much stress to both the land and the mental well-being of nearly an entire state.
Now again, Jesus Christ warned amongst all of those signs for this specific generation, our generation, one of those signs were going to be earthquakes. So depleting of the water, if it causes earthquakes, look, the Lord already warned about these earthquakes that are coming. Look for them because they're going to be big ones. That's what the Lord said in His Word when He said there would be great earthquakes.
The government's consumer price index is showing little or no inflation. Well, try telling that to shoppers in the supermarket checkout line. Here's Michelle Miller.
I'd like the government to stop by my house, come food shopping with me, and see where the real costs are.
Writer Jen Singer, mother of 2 teenage boys, wrestles with her grocery list every week to keep the household budget from getting away from her.
We go through one of these every couple days. It's a big part of my take-home pay. An apple a day, can't afford it at these prices. Save 90 cents.
It's not her imagination. While the government says prices are up 6.4% since 2011, chicken is up 18.4%, ground beef up 16.8%, and bacon has skyrocketed up 22.8%.
Oh my God.
Making it a holiday when it's on sale.
Bacon for $3. Things that are going up in price are the things that I absolutely need to buy. It's the meat, it's the milk, it's the eggs, and it's getting out of hand. $8.32 for this.
Convergex market strategist Nick Polis.
Moms can really tell the government a lot about inflation. Food inflation is far greater than the government thinks it is.
But the big problem for families, wages are not budging.
If my income isn't going up, how am I going to keep up with inflation?
Median income is up only 1% a year. For Singer, that makes it hard to save for college tuition, which has been rising 6 to 8% every year for 5 decades.
The price of college is terrifying. And so we're looking at cheaper schools or scholarships, I hope. Run faster in track. That would really help me out a lot.
Many are concerned that while economists paint a benign picture, middle-class families are quietly struggling.
The disconnect is severe because it's the economists that make policy, but it's the people that have to live with the outcome of that policy, and that disconnect is growing to the point where I think it has to break soon.
Now I keep the heat down, we might as well wear a parka around here because it's the only way I can save money on heating.
As the costs go higher and the budget battle continues,
now this is a great price.
Every now and then,
$86.
A victory.
Now take a look at this article. April the 16th of 2014. Rising food prices pinching consumers. It doesn't end, folks. I've been warning about this since 1977. And everything is coming to fruition in this same generation. Look at this. World Bank sounds alarm on sharp rise of global food prices. World food prices rose in the first quarter of the year for the first time since their all-time high in August of 2012, driven by rising demand in China, drought in the United States, and unrest in Ukraine. Again, all of these signs converging at the same time. China inflation quickens to fastest pace in 4 months on food. China's inflation accelerated in May to the fastest pace in 4 months on food costs, while a decline in the factory gate prices moderated. Consumer prices rose 2.5% from a year earlier, the Statistics Bureau said today in Beijing. They exceeded the median 2.4% estimate in the Bloomberg News survey of economists. The producer price index fell 1.4% after a 2% decline the previous month.
This article was taken September the 24th, 2014.
thousands of Somalis have fled to this camp near the Ethiopian border this year, as a prolonged drought has made it impossible to make a living at home. I moved here because in the location where we lived before, we used to get water from wells. The wells have since dried up. I am here so that I can be closer to both the water supply and the town. Somalia has not had a stable government since 1991, when its military leadership was overthrown. Since then, Islamist militants have battled the central government, fostering terror across the country in their effort to establish an Islamic state.
Potatoes are the lifeblood of the economy in Tipi Madina, central Guinea, but the Ebola epidemic is strangling the industry. Borders with neighbouring countries have been closed.
There are no plans to open the borders, and the internal market is not open. Everything's blocked. So how long do we stop products for? At what price will we be able to sell them at in the future?
In the Sierra Leonean capital, Freetown, the prices of basic goods are rising.
Most of our bulk buyers who come from the provinces are not coming to town due to Ebola because their areas have been quarantined. So the prices right now are very high.
In Sierra Leone, 80% of the population works in agriculture, and there has been a sharp decline in activity, says Professor Jonathan Lee, Executive Director of the International Growth Center.
I'm going to turn my attention now to the water shortages threatening 2 million people in southern Iraq. Of course, this deals with the Euphrates River, and it becomes very important to prophecy when you read what Jesus said. Take a look. The Lord tells us, I'm going to start with Revelation chapter 9, verses 14 through 16. It says this. It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates, and the 4 angels who have been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of the mounted troops were 200 million. I heard their number. Now moving to Revelation chapter 16 verse 12, look what he says. The 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings of the east. Now, there's no question that the Euphrates River is drying up. And one of the reasons why it is drying up primarily is to fulfill Bible prophecy, because an army of 200 million soldiers from the east are going to cross it. And our generation has been the only generation during a drought situation that has now brought on the conditions that the Euphrates River would be so dry that people would be walking over the Euphrates River, exactly what Jesus said. Take a look at this video. Never before in the history that we've seen this great river Euphrates trickle to the point where soldiers would be able to cross it. You're living in that generation. And it's the generation that Jesus Christ is specifically warning you who are watching the video today. You'll have no excuses when you meet Jesus. As we head into March,
March 21st, 2014, again, more news about problems with food prices. In this article, global food prices set to rise due to severe weather. Watch the video.
India is the world's largest producer of rice, but I'm standing in what is normally a paddy field. And this year, unseasonal rains and hailstorms have destroyed standing rice crops in over 4 states in India. This has led to millions of dollars of losses for farmers. Historically, the price of Indian rice is more competitive than that of Thailand and Vietnam. But that could change if the government is forced to introduce a minimum export price. And if that happens, the price of the staple food will rise across the world. Coffee, the morning pick-me-up for millions of people around the world. But soon, your morning coffee boost could be costing you more. Brazil produces 40% of the world's coffee, but currently, growing regions have been facing the worst drought in 4 decades, with nearly half of the production of Arabica coffee beans destroyed. So now the world is bracing itself for the first coffee deficit in 5 years. Experts say your average cup of coffee could go up by 60 cents in the U.S.
The fruits and vegetables that feed America, lettuce, broccoli, and strawberries, the vast majority of U.S. supplies are grown here in California. In fact, America's Golden State is one of the world's leading producers of food. But the drought, which is devastating and is the worst for more than a century, has had a huge impact on the farmers and the production of these crops. It means for the consumer, prices will continue to soar. And as California moves into its long, hot summer, with little chance of any rain, the impact of the drought can only get worse.
To do workshops, children's workshops, teach adults, wedding cakes, birthday cakes, biscuits, anything edible and nice. The prices keep going up. The butter's very expensive anyway, but I've noticed icing sugar, when I started it was about 74p per 500 grams, now it's like £1.10 to £1.25, depending on where you get it from. I don't increase prices because there's so much competition around and a lot of people coming into cake making now, so we have to kind of try and balance things out, again shop around and find the best suppliers for what we need.
Well, with me now is Alan Clark, who is UK economist with Scotiabank. Good morning to you, Alan. Talking about food prices, first of all, tell us a bit about what's been happening with them.
Well, average food prices are going up by about 5%, which isn't great when the average person's only seeing a 1% pay rise over the last year. But it could be worse if you're trying to stitch your 5 a day. Fruit and vegetable prices have gone up by 10%. So cakes have gone up by less. It's not just always the truth by saying you save money by eating cake.
Yeah, why has it gone up so much then?
Well, wars, crises, droughts, lots of rain, it all adds up and it pushes food up.
And in terms of inflation generally, what are the biggest price pressures? We often talk about energy bills being the things that people spend their most money on.
Absolutely, and even this month petrol bucks up by 2–2.5%, that's another squeeze. University tuition fees, ironically, not a lot of people pay them, of the wider population, but that's adding to inflation. Strip out all the stuff that you can't really control. Actually, inflation is behaving itself, but we're feeling the pinch nonetheless.
Yeah, because we often talk about the Bank of England and their job to try and control inflation, and they would say that they're probably doing a good job of it, despite the fact that on average we see this higher figure, because as you say, taking bits and bobs away, the underlying inflation is okay. Is that right?
It is. I mean, we're feeling the pinch because of higher petrol, higher gas prices. We don't have any choice. We have to spend money on that. So to be penalised even further by banking and pushing up our mortgage rates, it would be a double. When we really hurt economic growth.
The hardest thing, though, when we're talking about inflation is the fact that wages aren't keeping up with the rate at which prices are going up by. So in real terms, people are actually seeing pay cuts in terms of what they're taking home.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, employment growth was very good last year, but it's slowing. Wage inflation has slowed. And with prices in the shops going up, we've actually got less and less money in our pockets. So normally we would spend less, but the fact that the Help to Buy scheme's coming has given us a feel-good factor because we perceive the house prices going up. That saved us from a much worse out.
So as I said, I don't care where you live. If you live in the UK, if you live in Somalia, Egypt, or in the United States, this problem is going to affect you. It's going to affect the world. This is what Jesus said, and you are seeing it. I don't know how many times I can convey this message, maybe enough over and over, so that you'll believe what Jesus tells you. And if you don't believe what I'm showing you from the Word of the Lord, just stay tuned. You're going to see more of it.
And when you look at the scope of the world, one might ask, how bad is it? Well, take a look at this article. How real is the water crisis? Most apocalyptic warning focus on oil, but there's an even more frightening and immediate problem looming on the horizon. A water crisis. Scientists, politicians, and business leaders worldwide are faced with drought and severe shortages of fresh drinking water, as well as water that's essential for industry, transportation, and agriculture. Here's a brief discussion of the catastrophe that's already engulfed much of the world. There's plenty of evidence to support the alarmists. An estimated 1 billion people, that's 1 out of every 7 people, don't have daily access to safe drinking water, according to one Drought, an international water rights advocacy group. An additional 2.5 billion people lack basic sanitation, and increased industrialization in developing countries like China, India, Brazil, and in sub-Saharan Africa has resulted in severe pollution of once viable sources of fresh drinking water. How widespread is the water crisis? It's causing serious problems on every inhabited continent, in rural areas, and in major cities alike. China has been forced to develop a plan that called for the diverting 6 trillion gallons of water each year to stem the southerly march of the Gobi Desert, according to Edward Wong of the New York Times. The nations of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon, the area once known as the Fertile Crescent, are reeling under the forced immigration of hundreds of thousands of water refugees. Bolivia, which once produced nearly all of its own food, now has to import much of its food supply because of a combination of drought, floods, and government policies. Now, for all you who live in the United States and think these things won't touch you, take a look at this question. But could the water crisis affect developed nations like the United States? It already has. An unprecedented combination of high temperatures and scarce rainfall has scientists predicting an extension of the severe drought that's now crippling the western half of America. Texas, which is withering under the worst drought since record-keeping began over 100 years ago, is expected to see no relief in the foreseeable future. The idea that desert cities like Las Vegas, Tucson, and Phoenix may become uninhabitable is no longer a far-fetched vision from a science fiction novel. Even places like England, that are normally cool and rainy, are suffering under a drought that's affecting their crop yields, says Nia Rea in the Wall Street Journal. What could these effects be on the world's food supply? Devastating if some predictions are realized. A 2011 report from Oxfam estimates that the average cost of food staples will rise as much as 180% by the year 2013, due in large part to water shortages. The potential of an international food crisis has caused the G20 nations to examine measures that will prevent famine, food riots, and other catastrophes. There's one other question here I want to cover. Is a water shortage the main problem? No. There's also the problem of water quality and the difficulty and expense of purifying water that's been contaminated with pollutants ranging from heavy metals, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and bacteria. Roughly 2 million people die each year from diseases caused by water pollution, and that number is likely to increase as more industrialization dumps more pollution into the water supplies of more crowded cities. So it's no question, it's not just a problem for the United States, it's a problem for the world. And this problem isn't new. It was written down many, many years ago by Jesus Christ, and we are beginning to live it now.
Now, let's review again nation against nation. This is where Jesus talks about it, Mark chapter 13. And I covered this a little bit, but let me give you an example of what can happen when food prices go up and food is scarce.
Around the world, there are a billion people who are already hungry and spend more than half of their money on food. These kinds of huge rural crop price increases can translate to 20 or 30% or more increases in their cost of food.
Young people who no longer can afford protein for themselves, can't afford fresh vegetables for themselves, middle-class parents can't afford to feed their children milk. This is when people get very angry. This is when people take to the streets. Clearly, this is a part of the whole. There's no question.
If the prices keep going up, then we have to learn how to improvise and just make no sense, like I said. Because it's going up, we didn't get a raise. Food going up, everything going up.
The cereal and breakfast food, all that stuff is going to the roof.
Every time I go inside, I spend like $250, and I don't get a lot of food. I mean, if I want to eat, I have to.
Imaginary wheat being bought and sold by financial giants is controlling the price of real wheat.
Keep in mind, Jesus talked about the wheat. Now you get a good idea why he mentioned it.
Who's winning? You got it. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, the largest holders, the largest financial dealers in this. They're doing very well.
I do know this. The wheat will continue to go up. The barley will continue to go up. And just about every food staple you get.
Almost doubling the challenge of increasing the amount of food we have to produce for people. And farmers are having a tough time keeping up.
We're take a whole lot. We got sick and tired. We get into it.
It's almost like a prophecy. Will America riot in the streets when they can't feed their kids? Man, oh man, you don't want to be around when that happens. So there you have it, the word of the Lord. You know what he said. You know what he's showing you now. What are you going to do about it? You're just going to blow it off and say that all of these things are nothing but a coincidence? Or are you going to pay heed to the one who created you for a purpose? That purpose was to enjoy your life and love Jesus Christ, worship him, both in song and just loving him. He's waiting for you. He wants you to be in his kingdom where, like he said here, never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat on them, nor any scorching heat. God bless.